Let's make Africa the tree of life. Let's make Africa the tree of life. Hello, welcome to Josh Moment. So, in today's episode, we'll be looking at the history of the Kingdom of Dahomey. So, if you are new to this channel, don't forget to subscribe to this channel, like and share the video. So, let's start today's episode. So the Kingdom of Dahomey was located in West Africa. Dahomey, as it was known in its early years, was formed by a mixture of various local ethnic groups on the Dahomey plain. The tribal groups, possibly forced to move due to the slave trade, were grounded or were guided around highly centralized strict military culture, which was aimed at securing and eventually expanding the borders of the small kingdom. The kingdom became a major regional power in the 1720s when it conquered the coastal kingdoms of Alada and Whydah. With control over these key coastal cities, Dahomey became a major center in the Atlantic slave trade until 1852, when the British imposed a naval blockade to stop the trade. War with the French began in 1892. And the French took over the Kingdom of Dahomey in 1894. The throne was vacated by the French in the 1900s, but the royal families and then remained key positions in administration and then continued to have a large impact in politics of the French administration and post-independent Republic of Dahomey, which was later renamed Benin in 1975. So historiography of the kingdom has had a significant impact on work far beyond African history, and then the history of the kingdom forms the backdrop for a number of novels and plays. So now that was a gist. So let's go into details of what the kingdom entails and all that. So before the Kingdom of Dahomey, evidence suggests that the Dahomey Plateau was settled by a number of small tribes and commonly known as the Gedevi. However, because of lack of resource and access to key trade routes in the region, the plateau was very poor compared to the surrounding areas. To the east of the Dahomey Plateau, the Oyo Empire in present-day Nigeria was at the peak of its powers and exercised some hegemony over the tribes in the area. To the south, there were two prominent kingdoms, Alada and Whydah, which had power along the Atlantic coast. The coastal area had come in contact with the Portuguese in the 15th century, but significant trade did not start until 1533, when the Portuguese and then the city of Grand Popo signed a trade agreement. So let's look at the rise and expansion of the Kingdom of Dahomey. So the empire was established in about 1600 by the Fon people who had recently settled in the area or were possibly as a result of intermarriage between the Aja people and then the Gedevi. The palace in Dahomey was established in the early 17th century. The fundamental king of the Kingdom of Dahomey is considered Baja, who ruled from 1645 to 1685, and he built the royal palace of Dahomey and began raiding and taking over towns outside the Dahomey plateau. So at the same time, the slave trade began increasing in size in the coastal regions, which through the kingdom of Whydah and Alada came in contact with the Portuguese, the Dutch and the British. The Dahomey kingdom became known to the European traders at this time as the major source of slave trade in the slave trade at Alada and Whydah. King Agaja, grandson of Webaja, came to the throne in 1718 and began significant expansion of the Kingdom of Dahomey. By 1720, King Agaja renounced the kingdom's allegiance to Alada and began increasing military activity throughout the region. In 1724, Agaja offered his military to help with a succession struggle within Alada. However, he turned his forces on the army of Alada and took over the city, relocating its capital from Dahomey to Alada. In 1724, Agaja took over the city of Whydah, thus became the primary force on a major part of the coast. In 1729, Agaja began war with the Oyo Empire with a number of cross-border raids. During the war, the royal family of Whydah returned to the throne, forcing Agaja to fight to reclaim the city. He moved much of his army with a significant portion in the back, composed of women dressed like male warriors. This is possibly the beginning of the Dahomey Amazons. The Whydah royal family had assumed that the Dahomey army had been weakened in the war with Oyo, and upon seeing such a large force, fled from the city. In 1730, the war with Oyo ended and Dahomey retained domestic control but became a tributary to the Oyo Empire. By the end of Agaja's reign, the kingdom of Dahomey occupies significant area, particularly the crucial coastal cities of Alada and Whydah. So Agaja created much of the administrative apparatus of the kingdom and then instituted the key ceremony of the annual custom, or the Zuetanu in Fon language. There was a significant succession fight after the death of Agaja, and then the recognized heir after all these struggles was Tegbesu, who ruled from 1740 to 1774. Tegbesu moved the capital city back to Dahomey, but had a deal with a number of different factions in the powerful members of the kingdom and in keeping conquered territories loyal. At the same time, the empire continued the slave trade throughout the region and became a major supplier to the Atlantic slave trade. In the late 18th century, Oyo put pressure onto Dahomey to reduce its participation in the slave trade, largely to protect its own slave trade, and Dahomey complied by limiting some of the slave trade. In 1818, King Gezo, who ruled from 1818 to 1858, came to the throne by forcibly replacing his older brother, Adandozan. Crucial in Agezo's rise to power was the financial and the military assistance of Felix Francisco de Souza, who was a prominent Brazilian slave trader located in Whydah. As a result, Gezo named de Souza the Chacha, or the Viceroy of Trade in Whydah, providing him with significant more power and money. The title Chacha remains an important honorary position in Whydah to this day. In 1823, Gezo led armies against Oyo, and this time was able to end the tributary status of Dahomey and permanently weaken Oyo. So let's look at how the slave trade was suppressed in the kingdom of Dahomey. So two major changes occurred in the 1840s and 1850s, which significantly altered politics in Dahomey. First, the British, who had been a major purchaser of the slaves in the Dahomey kingdom, began taking actions or taking stance against it to abolish the slave trade in Dahomey somewhere in the 1830s. They sent multiple diplomatic parties to Gezo to try and convince him to end Dahomey's participation in the trade. Of all these, Gezo did not comply. However, he thought of the political consequences of ending such a profitable trade. So Abeokuta was founded in 1825, and then the intention was to provide a safe haven for people to be safe from the slave raid by Dahomey. So in 1844, Dahomey and Abeokuta went to war, and Abeokuta was victorious. Internally, the pressure resulted in a number of changes. Gezo rejected British requests for ending the slave trade, but at the same time began expanding significantly the palm oil trade as an economic alternative. Politically, the debate became centered around two political factions, namely the elephant and the fly. The elephant connected with Gezo had high-profile political leaders, and then the Creole slave traders like the family of De Souza, who pushed for continued activity in the slave trade and resistance to British influence or pressure to stop the trade. The fly faction, in contrast, was a loose collection of palm oil producers and some chieftains who supported the accommodation with Abeokuta and the British in order to expand the oil trade. So at the policy and war debate held at the annual customs, these two factions held a number of tense discussions about the future of the kingdom of Dahomey. So in 1851 to 1852, the British imposed a naval blockade on the port of Dahomey in order to force them to end the slave trade. In January 1852, Gezo accepted a treaty with the British ending the export of slaves from Dahomey. In the same year following, Gezo suspended large-scale military campaigns and human sacrifice in the kingdom. However, political pressure contributed to the resumption of the slave trade and large-scale military Large-scale military action in 1857 and 1858. Gezo was assassinated by a sniper associated with Abeokuta, and large-scale warfare broke between Abeokuta and the kingdom of Dahomey. This one again ended in favor of Abeokuta, and the result was that the slave trade could not be significantly re-established to its 1850 level. The power of the slave trade in the empire decreased. Then the palm oil became a significant part of the economy. So, considering how powerful Dahomey was, let's look at how the Europeans were able to colonize it. So let's look at European colonization of the kingdom of Dahomey. So in 1889, King Gleli died and his son, Bihanzen, came to power and immediately became hostile to the French in negotiations. So Bihanzen renounced the treaty with France, providing them with the city of Cotonou, and began raiding the possessions. The hostility hit a high point when Bihanzen began conducting slave raid in French protectorate along the coast, namely Grand Popo, in 1891. That year, the French military decided that a military takeover was the only solution and placed General Alfred Amédée Dot in charge. So the Franco-Dahomean War lasted from 1892 until January 1894, when Dot captured the city of Abomey and King Bihanzen. Notable in the war was the defeat of the Dahomey Amazons in November 1892. Dot named Agoli Agbo the king of Dahomey, largely because he was seen as the most malleable of the alternatives, and exiled Bihanzen to French possessions in the Caribbean. So the French began changing key aspects of administration and politics in the kingdom of Dahomey. In 1899, the French instituted a new poll tax, which was highly unpopular, and Agoli Agbo opposed the tax, causing serious political problems in the French protectorate. As a result, on February 1900, the French deposed Agoli Agbo and ended the kingdom of Dahomey. The French, though, brought together many key members of the kingdom as the chiefs of cantons. French Dahomey included the kingdom of Dahomey with Porto Novo and an area to the north of loose tribal control. So now let's look at some of the legacies of the kingdom of Dahomey. So French Dahomey administration remained over the area from 1900 until the 1960s, when the country gained independence and took the name Republic of Dahomey. In 1975, however, the name of the country was changed from the Republic of Dahomey to Benin. The king of Dahomey remains an important ceremonial position and continued through French administration and independence. Since 2000, there has been a struggle over the position with Agoli Agbo III and Wedoni Bihanzen holding rival claims to the throne. And if you had followed this discussion or presentation, you should know that Bihanzen should be heir to the throne at the expense of Agoli Agbo, who was appointed by the French. Anyway, let's continue. The political and economic hierarchies of Dahomey have remained crucial in post-independence Dahomey and Benin. One of the key leaders in the triumvirate, which dominated politics in the country from the 1960s until 1972, was Justin Ahomadegbe Tometin, twice the head of state of the country, who garnered significant political power through his connection with the royal family or royal lineage of Dahomey. The descendant of Francisco Felix de Sousa remained very important political leaders in Benin to this day, including Colonel Paul Emile de Sousa, who was head of state from 1969 to 1970. Also Isadore de Sousa, President of National Assembly from 1990 to 1991, among others. So there's this French citizen or French Dahomey-born French citizen by name Kojo Tuvalu Bueno, who ruled or lived from 1887 to 1836, and he claims to be the prince of Dahomey, but had lived most of his life in France. But he had an interesting opinion which suggests French African colonial citizens must be seen or recognized as French citizens. That's such an interesting opinion anyway. So we end today's episode here, and then if you are new to this channel, don't forget to subscribe to this channel, like and share this video. See you in the next episode. But before we go, don't forget, one day our lives will become history. What will posterity say about you? See you in the next episode.